the U.S. military is one of the most dominant forces in the world. There are still about 40,000 U.S. troops and 179 U.S. bases in Germany, over 50,000 troops in Japan, and 109 bases, and tens of thousands of troops with hundreds of bases all over Europe. Over 28,000 U.S. troops are present in 85 bases in South Korea. And in the United States alone, there are over 223 military installations alone. The DoD has stated that they can reduce their spending by 21% without reducing their effectiveness. This can be done by getting rid of unneeded military bases in the U.S. They have said that we do not need those bases. By getting rid of these, we can reduce costs, maintain them, and costs for personnel. The only reason that they did not do this is because Congress required them to keep these bases in the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2013. These bases are all things that are being used now, but how about the things that we have been spending money on for years? So in this picture behind me, you see pink highlighted countries. What that represents is the U.S. military's presence in these countries. There's 74 countries worldwide where the U.S. Military presence is alive, and 100 bases throughout these countries. Nuclear weapon development has grown. From 1940 to 1996, the military has spent $5.8 trillion on nuclear weapons. This is 29% of the budget during that time period. Most of this has been spent on making those weapons available for us from all sources such as submarines. Only 7% of the total amount of money spent has actually been spent on making new weapons. Taking care of the waste that has been used in the weapons has also been a large part of our spending. Maintenance for these weapons is also a large part of the budget spent on nuclear weapons. Now my question to you, is it worth the countless spending we do? There are ways to cut the DoD budget, still be the most dominant force in the world, and start to focus on our home court and better our future as a whole. As you can see behind me, the education budget is not as nearly as high as the national defense budget. And by looking at the entire graph, you can see we as Americans spend more on our national defense than any other thing in this country. And as of 2015, the United States spent $610 billion alone on our military. To put that into perspective, the next top 7 countries in defense spending after the U.S. are China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, France, the United Kingdom, India, and Germany. And if you put all their defense spending in one lump sum, these nations spend less than the United States combined. And as stated earlier, the United States military is involved in more countries than just our own. Because of our involvement in the Middle East, we as Americans are still spending money trying to pay for the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. While our allies across the pond in France are involved in only 7 countries, we stretch to every continent on the earth, which is something that we as citizens don't recognize. Another point we as Americans don't realize is this is all going towards the constantly rising $610 billion that we are spending. Our government leaders are usually trying to justify the spending of this money. Another point we as Americans don't realize is this is all just adding to the rising $610 billion military we own. Government leaders attempt to justify the spending of this money with a strong patriotism, a sense of fear, and telling us all the money we spend on our military will ensure our current status as a superpower. We don't need to spend as much as we do. In reality, the United States could cut their spending by exactly 50% and still spend more than any country on this planet. It's a broken system with a rallying cry that doesn't apply anymore. We are, of course, always a target, but our military is being seen as a priority over domestic responsibilities. America was spending $14 million per day to fight ISIS in 2015. Sure, ISIS is a strong problem that we must defend against, but is it worth the millions of dollars that we spend on a daily basis to fight them? We as Americans don't need to be police officers in these other countries' affairs. We need to clean our plate at home before serving ourselves at others' dinner tables. It comes down to the question though, when is enough enough? Where's our ceiling for war? Our national debt is rising, and yet the United States hasn't relocated funds to our increasing national debt. We as Americans are blessed to have such a powerful defense, but something you have to ask yourself. Does it come at too high of an expense? Is it worth preparing for war when in that preparation we take away from our domestic responsibilities? We need to start focusing on those that hold the key to our success for the future. But how can our education system strive toward bettering themselves with only $60 billion divided over 50 states with a few hundred school districts in each state? Not to mention the amount of universities we have within our borders. There are some really good school systems out there, but the majority of them don't have the funding they need to push their students in the right direction. And what we as Americans are seeing these days is that education is a must. Education cannot be suspended for a lack of funds. Everyone goes to school, and college is becoming too expensive. Schools need money to function, and one day we won't be able to properly fund our school systems due to our own priorities. Time is running out for our future if we continue to ignore this necessity. With the ever-growing tensions from terrorist groups comes the constant desire to maintain or even destroy their progression in becoming even stronger than maintainable. It makes countries too cautious to the point where they always want to be over-prepared for that one situation that pushes them to war. Whether you think it's true or not, everyone fights for peace, which means there will always be war because of that someone out there that wants to push their views into the minds of the people, thinking it's the correct choice over the opinion of the next person. With that comes the importance of having a dominant military force, but there has to be a point where you have to take a step back and think. Why do we spend more money fighting for peace when we can fuel the successors of tomorrow? Cutting the DoD's budget wouldn't harm the United States' reputation in its ability to restore order when needed. Cutting the DoD's budget wouldn't harm the United States' reputation in its ability to restore order when needed. We would be, according to data, still one of the most powerful militaries in the world. So why keep letting our chances at a better, more thriving future keep fading away? If we cut military spending, it would be important to implement that money into the right areas like education and decaying our national debt a little at a time. If the spending gets cut, it allows the military to only have the personnel that are the best at what they do. And instead of sending 100,000 of military personnel across the ocean, we would only have to send a few thousand that can execute the task presented with very, very few mistakes. On the flip side, the United States will become a thriving empire that is dominating the economy because they made the precise decision that enabled it to happen. They balanced the budget. Now that my lecture is coming to an end, and your face is buried in the desk, and you're snoozing away, I leave you with one more thought. Why does it take $610 billion to maintain the foreign countries when we really need to start focusing on our home court, our home people? When they're struggling, it's important to focus on them, not what's going on across the ocean. It's time to start bettering our future and giving the tools needed to the people who are going to make that happen. So now I ask you to look around the room because we are in the future.